Hello and welcome to another installment of FIT Talks, the oral history program of the Fashion Institute of Technology, one of 64 campuses of the State University of New York. I'm James Ferguson, a Special Collections Associate at the FIT Library. We're coming to you today from the FIT campus on West 27th Street and 7th Avenue in Manhattan. It is December 4th, 2025, and the time is 4:05 p.m. Eastern Time. I have the privilege to be joined today by Professor Carmita Sanchez-Fong of the Interior Design Department. Professor Sanchez-Fong, welcome to the program and thank you for participating.
Thank you for the invite. How wonderful to be here. Thank you very much.
So, for context, would you please tell us a little bit about your childhood and upbringing?
Okay. I was born in Ecuador. My parents come from the small town of Alausi, where I was born with my brother. I'm the oldest of six. So two were born in Alausi and two were born in a small town of Machachi, which is far away from Alausi, actually, quite a bit. But my father went to Machachi when there was the construction of the Pan American Highway. And he helped with the construction of the tram that connected Quito to Machachi. And that's how we ended up in Machachi. We stayed there. My father was a tailor, a prolific tailor, I like to say. It's just the incredible clothing that he did. And my mother was a midwife. She was the midwife of the town. Wow. So it was both, right? You have this person who is interested in detail with his fashion and his tailoring. And then my mother who just had a huge heart for people and tons of compassion. And that's how we grew up.
Lovely. And as a child, what did you want to be when you grew up?
That's a funny one. I told my husband this morning, I said, I think they're going to ask me what I want to be when I grow up. And I said, I wanted to tell people what to do. And he says, you do that very well. No, I don't think I wanted to tell people what to do, but I wanted people to be happy. I really wanted people to treat each other well. And I thought that often people did not treat each other with as much consideration as respect as they should. And those are the times when I want to tell people how to behave. But I think that growing up, I wanted to help people. I wanted to work with people. And initially, people thought that I should be a psychologist or a therapist. And I thought that I will really make a terrible psychologist or therapist, and found architecture. I think it was a better fit. Mm-hmm. It had the detailing. And to say that I found architecture to be the thing that I fell in love with, not knowing, it was really interior design. I have never done architecture. I have always done interior design from the very beginning. And it was the idea that by changing things or by making things for the person, it fitted your style, it fitted your personality, it fitted you, and therefore made you a better human being. So it was really about helping people see life differently through the interior design lens, that I was able to bring all the other things that I wanted in life. And then I get to tell the client what to have.
Nice. What is your formal and or informal education?
So formally, I have an architecture degree from City College. I have a diploma on history and civilization from Eurocenter in Paris, where I did a year. And then I did a master's in curriculum design and technology. That is, I think, when I decided that education was for me. And the master's was intentional. I really wanted to know more about education and to really be good at it. And I think that that's what the master's did for me.
Nice, nice. Any informal education you want to speak to?
Oh my goodness, life. Life is the biggest source of the whole journey from Ecuador to New York, immigration, being a mother, being a wife. That's a tough one. Being a teacher, that's another tough one. I think all of them are schools of discipline, schools of thought, and is what make us all better human beings.
Nice. What was your first job?
Oh my goodness. When we came to the United States, I never worked when I was 15 when I came to the United States. So I had never worked. And my father had a evening job at a dry cleaners across from the apartment that we were living in. And when we arrived, we all went to meet the owners of the dry cleaners because they all wanted to see the 6 kids that my father had. They couldn't believe that he had 6 kids. So we all went to meet them. And they were just the most gracious and wonderful people in the world. And they found ways of hiring us. The littlest one, who was 7 years old, he could put the plastics on the clothing. The other one could do something else. So we all helped, and they hired me to be at the register. So I was the one who gave you your clothing and took in your clothing and charged you for the services. And it was the first time I did not speak English. I didn't need a lot of English. Right? I need a very, hello, and understand how to do the math, and so the English didn't have to be perfect. But Mrs. Mary, who was the owner, was excellent at just correcting my English and just saying, no, don't say it that way. No, don't use that word. No, that's not how you say it. And even watching my face to make sure that with my face I was saying one thing, and with my mouth I was saying something else. No, the two have to match. The mannerisms. She was just wonderful. And I think that was my first teacher in New York.
Nice, nice. What other kinds of jobs have you had?
When I was in college, I was working for Handy and Carmen in New York City. I thought that was a fantastic job. I was in high school. It paid for the extra things that I wanted to have, and it was really wonderful. And from Handy and Carmen, I did an internship for the Transit Authority, for MTA. And I ended up redesigning their offices, their J Street offices. So that was kind of nice. It was totally unexpected, the way that the internship worked out. They extended the internship. And then City College asked me if I wanted to have a second internship. And on my second internship, I went to work at the campus planning office for Hunter College. Hunter College had just finished their new building, and they were renovating all the spaces in the old building. So after having done that for the MTA, they asked me if I will do the drawings, and became a project manager for them, managing the relocation of the psychology department and the computer department, depending on the departments that we were doing. So that was Hunter College. That was a great introduction to detailing for me. And in architecture school, detailing had become a big deal. There were no computers. We did everything by hand. And unknown to me at the time again, the person that was in charge of the campus planning office had gone to an event. I had met some people from Swanke Hayden Connell. And he said, whoops, I have this woman that details. I did not know that, like he was proud of my detailing, which was really wonderful. And Swanke Hayden Connell called me up and interviewed me for a full-time job. So coming out of architecture school, I went to work for Swanke. And Swanke at the time, and this was 1985, because I was supposed to graduate in 84. We will talk a little bit about that. But in 85, that I went to work for Swanke, there were no computers. my train of thought just went on the other way because of the things that happened right before my graduation from college. But Swanke Hayden Connell was the number one interior design architectural firm in the United States. And we were doing major projects. We were doing American Express headquarters in New York. We were doing Manufacturers Hanover in London. We were doing the World Bank in Washington. We were renovating the Statue of Liberty. The projects were huge and beautiful, very beautiful. And again, unknown to me, the whole thing that they really liked was my ability to detail. And from there, we went into, they wanted to develop their own CAD system, their own computer-aided design system. Mm-hmm. So they created cubicles where they teamed up someone that was coming from an architectural background with a programmer, and now the two of them will work together to develop this program. You know, at what stage was AutoCAD in at that time? I don't know, but AutoCAD came out right, you know, through all of that, and it changed the world. It changed the world. For Swanke Hayden Connell, I was not in charge of the project. I was coming in kind of at the tail end of manufacturers of American Express, mm-hmm. but it was fully on the computer. Manufacturers Hanover was all of them just went on the computer. I think that the advantage for me at Swanke was that because I was young and I was so much into the computer and I had worked with the programmers and it had become kind of such a fluid thing in my life that they really liked the stuff that I was doing with the computer. And I know that Richard Hayden one day said, you know, you make that computer dance. So that was the biggest compliment I ever got with my computer skills. But it was really fun. It was fun, and I think because of the computer skills, I was assigned to projects that demanded those skills. The size of the projects demanded those skills. And so it was my outlet into the industry. But as a result, I kind of was cut out from other things, right? I wasn't developing the friendships. Now when I think mm-hmm. back, mm-hmm. you know, you go through teams, and this team is assigned to the next project and the next project. I got assigned to different teams every time because they were interested more in the technical skills. And actually that's what got me to FIT also, so.
Nice, okay.
Tons of value there.
Yeah. Well, how did you decide on your career, or how did it decide on you?
It decided on me. I think that when I was working at Handy and Harmon, they were paying me well to my knowledge, right? They were paying me very well. And I said to my father, listen, in this country, people can make money without going to college. Why do I have to go to college? And my father said to me, under my roof, you have two choices. You go to college or you go to college. And I said to him, what kind of a choice is that? And he said, well, the first one, you get to pick the college. The second one, I tell you which college to go to, but you go to college. So that was my... So I went to Queens College. I majored in pre-engineering. And there's a short story there, but you know, my brother and I were at Queens College at the same time. Mm-hmm. And I was a bit I wasn't sure. I knew that I wanted something technical. Engineering was something that really was something that I wanted. But my brother turns out to be a very competitive guy, and we were in the same calculus class. And I ended up having a better grade than he did. And he did not like that. We had a big fight. And I think that it was a bit of, when I was at Queens College, I was majoring in engineering because my father had said I had to major in engineering. But as a minor, I had theater and dance. Because I love theater and dance, that was my minor. Mm-hmm. So often I will come home very late because all the rehearsals were very late. And so I showed up one night and it's very late and I'm very tired and I'm sweating. It's the whole 9 yards. And my brother is going through his calculus because he that's just how he was. And he says, of course, you don't even know that you have an exam tomorrow. And I went, oh my gosh, of course I don't know. I completely forgot about it, but I'm so tired. I'm so tired that I decide I'm going to take a shower and I'm going to face the music tomorrow. And I'm going to figure out, how bad I do. I mean, at the end of the day, there was little that I could do. But when we got the grades, and I did a little better than he did, I don't think I did much better, but I did a little better than he did, he was upset. He was upset, and he decided to transfer to another college. And I decided that I loved him so much that I will transfer to another college. But neither one of us talked about it. Siblings don't talk to each other enough. Mm-hmm. He decided on his own that he didn't want to hurt me, and he will change. And I decided on my own that I didn't want to hurt him, and I will change. So he went to Buffalo University, and I went to City College. So why did I end up at City College? Because I went to City College and I met with him. And I said, I have all these credits that I have already taken. Which program will accept my credits? And the architecture department said, oh, we take all of them.
Wow.
So I had taken all these courses. The architecture department took my 2 years of schooling and gave me credit for that. So it made sense for me to do architecture because they were taking all my credits. Mm-hmm. So I will say it decided it for me. I was not the one that went, oh, this is, I mean, it's in the vein of what I wanted. I wanted something technical. I like detailing. I like paying attention to things. So it was in that line, but it was not exactly what I had intended from the very beginning.
Right. Now, how did you come to work for FIT?
Oh my gosh. My family, when I was, after Swanke Hayden Connell, there was something called Designers Friday. And if anybody remembers the 80s, they will think Designers Friday, oh, I know what that is. During Designers Friday, all the companies will present the latest thing on their projects. And I was at the time, had been assigned to Nomura Securities at Swanke. And the person who was the senior designer in charge of the project was going to do a presentation for Swanke at Designers Friday. And at Swanke during the summer, it was dress down day. So Friday was dress down day. And I was in my jeans. You have something nice on the top, but I was in my jeans. It was dress down day. And I get a phone call from Richard Hayden, the top notch at Swanke. And Richard says to me, because he said, Carmita, you need to come up. We need to talk. And I'm thinking I'm getting fired. Why will he call me up? Mm-hmm. Anyway, he calls me up because the senior designer that was presenting at Designer Saturday was stuck at the airport in London and couldn't get to do the presentation. And he wanted me to present what I was doing for Nomura. And I said, Richard, you realize that they want to hear about the finishes, the project. They want to hear this whole thing. And he says, well, they won't. They are going to hear what you have to tell them. You're going to tell them about the technology. You're going to tell them what you're doing. You're going to tell them how you come up with these ideas. You're going to tell them about the little things that you come up to make the computer do all of these other things. You're going to tell them about all of that. And how do you say no to that? I said, okay. I said, Richard, you have to also think. I said, there's a couple of things here. I said, it's dress down Friday. I'm not dressed for it. Number two, I said, the podium is prepared for her. She's a foot taller than me. So nothing was ready for me. Well, they fixed the podium. They put a little something there so that I will come up on the podium and look taller. My hair went up in a ponytail and I got glasses because I looked too young. There were fixings. And unknown to me, when I started talking about Nomura Securities and how we were using the computers and how I had met with the Nomura team and how we were doing all this work, everyone was interested in hearing about the technology. So it became a big deal. And it went in so much better than I ever thought, that unexpectedly great, and that everyone was happy. But as a result of that, I got a phone call from Alan Gaynor. I did not know Alan Gaynor. And Alan Gaynor said, "You're doing this work for Swanke." And he said, "I have an opening for a director of space planning and facilities management at my company, and I'll give you a tremendous raise on the salary." And me being young, I took the job.
Yeah.
And so I went to work for Alan, and in his team was a woman named Barbara Lowenthal, who was scheduled to teach at Baruch College. But when she agreed to teach at Baruch College, she did not know that she was pregnant. When it was about the time to start the classes, she realized she was going to have the baby in the middle of the semester. And she said, would you take the class? And I said, "I don't know how to teach. I wouldn't know where to get started." And she said, she said it was going to be my first time teaching, so it's not a big deal. She said, "And you're teaching to financial people." These were finance people from mostly Citibank and Chase, that needed to learn how to read a set of working drawings and understand building regulations before they approve loans. Mm-hmm. And I said, "Well, I can do that," because I was doing that day and night. And I said, I can do that. So I met with the person from Baruch College, and I said to him, "I've never done it before. How do you know that I can be good at this thing?" And he says, "Don't worry about that. The students take something that is called student evaluations." He says, "If you don't do well, you won't come back next semester." Mm-hmm. And so I came back for, I think, 4 or 5 years after that. But my family opened up a telecom company in Latin America, and they needed support. All of us went down there to help them. Things didn't go. We stayed there for about 2.5 years, but things didn't go the way that it was planned or intended. And we decided we need to go back. And we came back to the United States. And I will say, at a financial disadvantage, because things really had not gone well in Ecuador. And so it was kind of, And so it was time for Ernesto to get a job. And for me, I wanted to get a job. I had my daughter, Rebecca. But I wanted to work part-time because Rebecca was already 4.5. And she was going to start kindergarten, so I wanted to get a job. And FIT had an opening for a part-time evening instructor. And I met a guy by the name Ron Loveman, who sold me his class and who told me, but I said to him, "Can I watch you teach it?" And he said, "Absolutely." So I watched him teach a class, and he was so much fun that he was just fantastic. So I took the job because I think he was fantastic. He made the whole thing very interesting. He really had a deep love for the students, mm-hmm. which meant to me that's really the kind of teacher that I would want to have, right? So yeah. I will want to have him as a teacher, and I will want to be as good as he is. I taught at FIT for 7 years part-time. And on those 7 years, different opportunities for full-time positions came about. And I kept thinking, this is not something that I want to do full-time. The meetings sometimes were a little difficult because I attended the meetings and they were a little difficult. And I thought the politics is not something that I can really, I said, it's just not for me. Mm-hmm. Part-time seems really terrific. Full-time, I really have to give it a lot of thought. 3 full-time lines came by, and I passed them on because I just thought that it just wasn't for me. In that time, my son Nicholas was born, and on his first visit to the 1-year checkup, Dr. Hirsch starts turning him on the little table, and I said, "What's going on?" And he says, "I'm going to bring someone else." He brings in someone else. And it turns out to be another doctor who's a heart specialist. And Nicholas turns out to have a heart condition. And Ernesto was working at Frank Williams, who was paying him very, very well. but his insurance will cover 70% of the expenses that Nick could possibly have, and we will cover the other 30%. Well, we found out that the 30% that we would have had to cover if we had sold the house were not covered. And at that point, I really needed a full-time job with a 0% deductible.
Right.
And I got on my knees and I prayed for it, and I think I got it. That's how FIT came into the picture.
Wow.
So I never asked how much I was going to make. All I knew was that the deductible was 0, and I took the job.
What experiences stand out most for you during your time here at FIT?
I missed the meeting once after becoming full-time, and they were voting on how to have a 50-year celebration for the department. And at the meeting, they elected a chair of the fundraising committee. Guess who was the chair? The one that was absent.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So when I came, they said, "Oop, we elected you chair." That's what happens when you're absent. So I became the chair of that committee. But that was interesting. Everyone was very kind. The whole group of people that I met at FIT were all very kind. Maybe they didn't get along among themselves terrific, but they were all very kind people. They were all fantastic people. And among them was Ron Loveman, who I totally adore because he was my mentor and my everything. He was just fantastic. So that was one. When I became, then Superstorm Sandy happened, 2011. And it's the fall semester, and I'm teaching Design Technology 1. And we can see all the images that are coming in. And I say to the class, how is everyone doing? I know that this is looking really bad. How is everyone doing? And one of the young ladies in the class is Carmita. I live in Long Beach. And she says, it looks apocalyptic. I say, what do you mean? She says, it's completely destroyed. It's destroyed. She says, it's something that, and she said to me, have you ever seen the movie The Book of Eli? And I say, no. She says, well, that's exactly what it looks like. You're going to see The Book of Eli, and you're going to think of Long Beach. So I said, oh my gosh. I said, but it also appears that if there is such a damage, that there is an opportunity for all of you. I said, because these people need people that will help them see what is the future. Now that everything is destroyed, there is a future still for this. You have to be able to move forward. And I said, and you could actually lend what you know already, you could lend it to them and give them a vision of what these spaces could look like after an interior design hand has touched them. And from one thing went to the other one. I said, okay, you will go to Long Beach and you will find out how we can help them. I will go to the president to find out how I can pay for your help, because all of this. And at the time, John R. Buckle was the dean of the School of Art and Design. Of course, President Brown was there. Both of them were extremely supportive of us going out to Long Beach. They said, we will pay for the transportation, we will pay for the meals, go out there. And we got on a van and went out to, and even the photography department went with us. Curtis went with us. So we went out to Long Beach, and the devastation was mind-blowing. And I went and I met with the people that were in charge of the recovery. And I said to them, could I talk to you? Maybe we can help? I said, my students were all interior design and maybe they can help. And he pretty much said, I don't think so. Says, these people don't want to know about interior design right now. They're devastated. They cannot see anything. They cannot see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's going to be useless. I said, well, how are you reaching out to them? And he said to me through Facebook. I said, well, post it. Let them know that there are interior design students who are willing to meet with them to measure their existing spaces, to measure the existing conditions, to photograph it, to archive it, to create a library for them, and to give them possibilities of what could this look like should an interior designer stepped into their world. What can these spaces look like? And he said, I'll put it in, but I can guarantee you nothing is going to happen. By the end of the day, we had one person. So that was hope. I said, we have a person. We're going to meet with them. We're going to call them up, and we are going to find out what their needs are. And, there were so many conversations, and we're just starting. By the end of the day, the next day, we had 11 people. So now it was a problem, because how do you do 11 families? How do you take care of all of this? It was very interesting because we were in winter break. It was January. There was no way that we could reach it to the students. And one of the students said, well, we could send them all an email and find out if they are interested in working from wherever they are. Yeah. We created a Dropbox, and the group that was on site went and surveyed the spaces. I got faculty to volunteer. There were faculty who sketched. There were faculty who drew. There were faculty who did all kinds of things. They all volunteer. Nicole Mijon came to the site on the first day. The students were all there on the first day. And the rest is history. For a whole year and a half, we worked with the families, and we ended up doing a total of 17 families. And the students won a grant, and they had an exhibit downstairs where all the families came and visited. And it was really incredible because I don't remember who was the chief of police at the time. It was 19. So now we're about 2012. But him apparently came with his wife, and I didn't know. And I wish that I did, but I'm not remembering. And his wife is Victoria, but I didn't know her, and his name is going to come after I finish the meeting. But at that meeting, she saw what we had done, and the students were going, well, what are we going to do after this? I said, what do you mean, what are we going to do after this? She says, well, why can't we get other projects so that we can help other people? And I said, okay. I said, I'll figure it out. In my church, I went to my pastor, and I said, Abe, my students need to do something, and they want to help. So how can we do this? And he said, go to Hope for New York. Go to the site and find out where do they need that kind of help. Mm-hmm. And on the website they had, Hope for New York website, they had the laundry room at the Women's Center for the Bowery Mission. It was a very small room. And I emailed them and I said, my students would like to visit, and maybe we can consider it if this is a project for them. It is for their skill level. It is a perfect project, but we need to talk about budgets and this, all of these things. Mm-hmm. Well, Hope for New York was really fantastic. We went to visit, and when we arrived, the people that took care of the building said, I looked at the space and I went, oh my goodness, how could anybody do laundry here? And when I do the laundry, I want to read a book. I want it to smell nice. I want, to sit there and wait for my clothing. It's an experience. It's an experience. It was really bad. And I said to her, this is very sad. I said, it's very sad that this is where they have to do their laundry. And she said, oh, it has already been renovated by 2 or 3 different schools in New York City. And I went, what? She says, yes. There were 2 architectural schools. The last one that was here was about a year and a half ago. And that's when they told us to do these things. And when you look at the pictures, you will say and go, I said, okay, we're not those schools, we're FIT. And we're not architecture, we're interior design. We can make this look beautiful. And I said, but we need money. Where do we get the money? So Hope for New York was wonderful. Hope for New York said, tell us what you propose, mm-hmm, and tell us what the cost will be, and we will figure out the money. Well, the students, I said, you just go home with it. Propose it. Tell us what you want to do. What will this look like? But the idea for them was, all right, you're a person that has ended up at the Bowery Mission because you have issues. Maybe homelessness, maybe all kinds of issues that you may be having. And now you want to come to do your laundry. What is the experience that you want that person to have? And you had to see the kind of drawings that they came up with. They were so beautiful. We had to pick one. We sent it to them and they loved it. They just absolutely loved it. They didn't know exactly how it was going to happen, but they absolutely loved it. And we gave them the cost of it. And Hope for New York could not pay for the whole thing, but Hope for New York, I believe, gave us $10,000 or $15,000. And we reached out to the industry for donations. And now names are escaping my mind. I would have, if I had known I would have talked about this, then I would have had all my names in front of me. But we called Daltile. And Daltile, pretty much when we sent them the drawings and told them what the project was and who it was for, said to me, send the students to the showroom and let them pick what they want. That was the most amazing thing in the world. They picked what they want. They got it shipped. We talked to the Bowery Mission and we said, do you have a contractor that can teach the students how to do the work? Because now they wanted to do the work themselves. Because they said, now can we do the work? It's so small, can we do the work? They chiseled the floors of that space. They sanded all the pipes in that room. They sanded all the ceilings and the walls. And they made the space gorgeous. So that when people saw, they were going, I can't believe this space. I can't believe that you were able to do this. All the drawings are actually on the site on the FIT site with the students working and doing the work. It turned out to be an amazing project. I didn't know that the wife of the commissioner, of the police commissioner, was on the advisory board for the Bowery Mission. So she calls me up and she says, I'm Victoria. And I said, Victoria, what can I do for you? I didn't know who Victoria.
Right.
And she said, I just visited the Bowery Mission and I saw what your students did with the laundry room. And I said, did you like it? And she says, did you like it? I almost fell backwards, she said. We had different people coming to, different student groups coming to do the work. Never did I imagine that you could make something look, it is absolutely stunning, she says. And then she says to me, I want them to do all the bedrooms upstairs. And I said, Victoria, I should tell you that we have zero budget. We have no budget. And she said, I have someone that will pay for all the bedrooms to be redone and the students can do it. Wow. So my students got to do all the bedrooms at the Bowery Mission Women's Center with $0 because Victoria had, as part of their board, had all the money that will pay for all the things that they needed. So that's how it all started. And from there, we just went on. We did Hephzibah House, the drawings for Hephzibah House. We did Restore New York. When we did Restore New York, my daughter Rebecca was already a young lady and she volunteered for the project. It was all with volunteers. My husband was on every project. Every picture he shows up because he was the first volunteer that I hired. But it became a family event. So my children will volunteer, my friends will volunteer, and these projects kept happening, and it was just really wonderful. And then someone called me up about going to Guatemala to do a school in Guatemala, a bottle school in Guatemala, and it was called Paying Forward. And I said, well, I don't know that my students, it's Guatemala. I said, well, they want to do. And I come to them and I say, well, there is this, I got this phone call. If you're interested, they want us to do this project in Guatemala. It's for a middle school and we will be part of a team. And it's what kind of a team? I said, well, it's a community service. It's a real project, it's a real team. The women were charged with collecting the garbage and cleaning up the town and putting the trash into bottles that were so well compacted that they could be used as bricks.
Wow.
But the women had the job of putting 12,000 bottles to be used as bricks for this project. And the men were in charge of building the structure. We will come in and finish, do all the finishes of the inside. Mm-hmm. It didn't seem like it was something that we were going to be able to do. And the students said, absolutely, we want to go. And I said, well, we need to pay for airfare, we need to pay for this thing, we need to pay for all these things. And they said, we will do a GoFundMe and we will raise the money. I had not heard of GoFundMe until that day. And they raised the money and we all went. And when it came up, my son went with me and his girlfriend went with me. So it was always a family affair. So we all went, and what a fantastic experience. That was an experience to write books about, because when we arrived, we realized we had been given guidelines. The girls, the students, were not supposed to wear anything without shoulders. They had to have their shoulders covered. Mm-hmm. They couldn't do this, they couldn't do that, because the men and women, then the women were traditionally dressed, very traditionally dressed in Guatemala, and the men were not supposed to participate on this portion of the project. They were just, but the whole town was watching all these girls do this men's work. They finally said, okay, they can help us with maybe mixing the concrete, but the girls were ready to mix the concrete. But when we arrived, what was funny was that when we arrived, because I don't want to miss this detail, when we arrived, they said, well, you have 8 women. I said, that's correct. My program is 91% female, sometimes 95% female. So yes, we have 5 women. And he says, how are they going to work? I said, what do you mean? He says, they have to be in the bus at 7 a.m. because we have to be on the site at 8 a.m. Then they have to work the whole day until 5 p.m. Do they know that? I said, absolutely. So I went and I met with them and I said, you have to all be here at 7 o'clock. There's going to be a lunch break at 12:30. 12:30 to 1, we're going to have lunch on site, and then we go back to work until 5. They pick us up at 5 and they bring us back here. We should be back here by about 6:15, 6:30, and everybody, and I'm hoping, I'm waiting for them. They're all ready for this. There was no doubt in their minds that they could do this, that this is what they wanted to do. They were so fantastic. The next morning, I'm coming down, and it's about 6:30, a little after 6:30, because I want to make sure that everybody, they had said by 7 the bus is leaving, yep. And I had said that to them. And I come down, and I said, where is everyone? And they said, oh, they just came down, they had gone for a walk, they went for a run, and they were all showering, and they're coming down, and they should be here in 2 minutes. In 2 minutes, they were all there. Wow. They had gone for a walk, some runs, and they worked. Their work ethic was something to write about. And the men were just looking, and they're going, how is it possible that they can do all this work? That these women are doing everyone was just taken by the whole experience. So it was incredible. At the end, they gave us this reception that everyone, you will see pictures also on the FIT site, because it was an experience for all of them, a fantastic experience. So experiences at FIT, they have been fascinating. Mm-hmm. We stopped doing the service learning projects when I became the chair. So about 9 years ago, we stopped doing the service learning projects. There was no time to be the chair and to do service learning. It's just impossible. So it hasn't happened. But the experiences did go into the classroom, and I have to say Eric Daniels picked up on that very nicely, and he does it as part of the curriculum. It became part of the curriculum. It's now in 6th semester, and he does some fantastic projects in New York City. So we're still doing it in a different way, a different level, but that's probably one of the best things to happen at FIT.
Nice, lovely.
Yeah.
What person would you say has had the most positive influence on your life, and what did they say or do to influence you?
Oh, wow. So I have to say, probably, if the person that has the greatest influence in my life is God. I mean, he's the big influencer in my life. But as being the influencer in my life, he gave me great parents. And I think my father was a community organizer, a hardcore organizer for the people, and an activist. And I think that his heart has transferred over to my family and to my children, because I can see it in my daughter. She's a hardcore activist, and I can and when I hear her, it's almost like I'm hearing him. So I think that that he is my biggest role model. But my mother became a widow at the age of 47. I was in my last semester of architecture school and could not graduate because he died 3 weeks before graduation, and I could not present my thesis. That's why my semester went over by a semester. And so when he died, I think that the whole world saw it as a sign that maybe we should go back to Ecuador. What are we going to do here? 6 children without a dad and with just my mom. But my mom is... her last name should be Resilience, because she has been just incredible. She made sure that everyone went to college, that everybody did what they needed to do, that everybody behaves the way they're supposed to behave. Mm-hmm. So it's incredible. And then at FIT, I think Ron Loveman, who was my mentor, is probably he taught me love for teaching, because he modeled that. He modeled teaching in a way that touched the students and that made them fall in love with the subject even when it was not really terrific. Because he said you have to make them fall in love with it. It might not be great, but they have to fall in love with it. Your job is to make them fall in love with it. And so I think that he was just a fantastic mentor and gave me love for teaching, I think.
Mm-hmm. That's great. What are your future plans or dreams?
Well, I have been attending seminary for a while now. Mm-hmm. And this time I am enrolled at Westminster Seminary. And I will be presenting my proposal for a thesis in the first week of January. I hope that my dean will approve my thesis. One of the deans has approved it. I have to present it to the second dean. And my thesis is on Christianity and culture. And with the thought that that because I have been working with high school students for so many years, and I have great connections with the Urban Assembly, mm-hmm. that I will be able to offer as an option to the students to see if they want to participate in workshops that brings high school students from different, because I want it to be as diverse as they could possibly be, to discuss Christianity and culture, because I think Christianity to me and to someone else is very different, and so is culture. And so for them to have a nice conversation, a really uplifting conversation, because I think we need that these days, we need that very much. And to really get to know one another, to create kind of a network of people, of young people, that they realize that at the core of their humanity, they're all the same. That it doesn't matter where you came from, what you did, what you didn't do, and what none of it matters at the end of the day. You were created by a God who loves you. And no one can claim that. No one else can take that from God. No one can take it that there is no human being that can create another. And therefore they were all created by the same God. And if they were all created by the same God, then who has the answers? Who holds the answers that we all have? And are we willing to ask them? So giving them an opportunity to ask the questions, because at the end I would like them to be co-authors of a book that I am going to title Stranger at the Gate. And that is the idea that we're all strangers in life. and that there is one day we are on one side and on another day we're on another side. So if you have been given grace and you're at that gate, what should you be given to the one on the other side? And so it's the idea that the commonality among human beings is so fantastic that we could all just support one another and be the kind of humanity that we were meant to be. So that's the project.
Nice.
We will see what happens with it.
Yeah. And what would you most like for people to remember about you?
Oh my gosh. I want them to know that I love people. I love people. I love family. I believe in people. I believe in the human spirit. And I believe that people can be fantastic at whatever they choose to be because they have it in them to be the kind of people that they want to be. That it is just... Is it hard work? Of course it's hard work. There's nothing good that doesn't include hard work. It is hard work. Is it demanding? Yes, of course it's demanding. If it wasn't demanding, then what kind of work is it? But if you are willing to work for it, you are going to get it. And you are going to change the world through it because you are going to change yourself first. And if you change yourself, now you can change the world. So I want them to know that at the core of it all, I believe in a God that is just so fantastic that he can make all these changes happen.
Nice. And finally, what has sustained your heart?
He has sustained my heart. I think that if God had not loved me first, I would have never loved him. And that if he did not believe in me, I would have never believed in myself. And that if he didn't provide the way that he has provided all my life, he has paid attention to every detail. That if he had not done all that work, then I wouldn't be who I am today.
That's lovely. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. I know that it was a little long, but I thank you. I would have never thought of talking about all these things, like how life goes. But it's been the FIT experience has been a wonderful experience in every aspect. I think that the interior design department has been a fantastic department to work in. I think that all the people that work in the interior design department and in FIT in general, because I haven't met anybody at FIT that didn't love teaching and that was not here for the best of the students, to really give of their best to make them be the best. And I think that is the excellence of FIT, that it has faculty that at the core deeply care about their students, believe in their programs, and want to make the world a better place through the people that they send out.
Wonderful. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you very much.